Relax, boy. All right, here we are. So, welcome to Maze Game 201. We are going to dive into the intermediate part of making a maze game. Let me see now. And as you can see, we've got a lot of territory to cover, with more coming soon, apparently. All right. So my plan is as we move on, I'm going to bypass the beginner part, or at least have that done ahead of time, so that we can get right into the intermediate and advanced stages. The only reason I would do the beginner part is basically just to get set up here. Again, that's something I could do off camera, because I think we want to get down to the nitty-gritty of things. So, what I'm going to do tonight is I'm going to sit through the lecture and take some notes. And that's knowing that I'm going to have to go back to this lecture for reference material now and then. So I'll do what I can. And once again, I'll just interject, and put in my experience in programming and such. That all said, let's just get right into it. Let's get full screen. There we go.
This tutorial is going to be a lot more free-form than the easy mode one, where we're going to actually build this sort of from scratch. We still have all the assets that we created. We still have the module, but we're going to actually build the graphics. We're going to, or the objects with the graphics that are provided. We're going to...
That's exciting. I can tell you right away, this is going to be a bottleneck out of any game that's created, is creating graphics, sprites, etc.
Look at some of the code that's underneath. We're gonna start to tweak some things in different ways. We're gonna set up our own palettes and things like that that we didn't do. And we're also gonna do things like we're going to add a start and a win screen and some other small details that we didn't do in the other tutorial.
Okay, so basically we're gonna take the game that I just laid out, just slap together someone else's stuff, and I'm gonna start to mold that into something for me. Very cool.
The tutorial was to really get people's confidence up to know that, hey, this is possible, I can do this. And now this tutorial is to say, okay, if we're really starting from scratch and we're using our own resources, how could we go about creating that exact game with our own resources from scratch? So we're not going to be loading in the entire run of palettes and the entire run of game objects. This is going to be a longer tutorial where we're going to do effectively the same thing, but we're going to do it in a much more concerted way, where we're going to look at how things are functioning. And I hope that really helps, especially if you sort of watch these and do them back to back. You'll really sort of know how to do this kind of game using this module. So,
okay, so blah blah blah. Basically, here's how we can, as I said, drill down deeper.
We're going to jump in, and we're going to go to new project. And again, we're going to create blank tile sets, and I'm going to call this maze tutorial medium, the other one.
I think what I want to do is perhaps make a copy of the game that I have, or add to it one or the other. Basically, let's say basically make a copy, version 1, and version 2 is whatever it is that we're covering here. That way, we don't have to create the assets, we can build right on top of it.
Being easy mode. And I'm going to start with the same module, the same maze base 4, 5, 6. I'm going to hit OK. And again, what that did was, let's take a look at actually what it did. Last time we brushed over it. Now we're going to actually take a look. Go into project settings and go into, let's just look at tile.
Okay, this is where what I failed to record last time. So the cog is our project settings. I get the feeling that's going to be looked at for every single game that's covered. Someone else joined us. Hello.
Types. These are labels. We can change these into whatever we wanted. So if I wanted to like change the name of this to warp to screen.
Okay, so might not mean much, but that just means we can customize these. We can call them variables, I guess.
Now, everywhere where the 0, 1, 2, 3 number tile shows up, it's going to say warp to screen. This doesn't actually do anything. This is just an identifier for me, and every module is going to have different tile types. It's going to have different names for monster action steps and the behaviors that they can do. It might have different names for game states. For instance, if you're making like a poker game or something like that, right? They would have different game states than if you're making a Mario game or...
Okay, I like that. Don't know if he's going to cover that on this one or the next one, but I do like that you can do game states on here. That's awesome.
If you're making a game that was based on the Olympics, these would be very different as far as the game states they might have. So you can name these, and then throughout the rest of the software, those names will stick. And it's just an easier way to remember these things than like game object 0, game object 1. Now you can actually give them names. So the next thing is to look at is our script settings. This is really what a module is. It's a collection of scripts that make the game.
Okay, look at that. Already we're seeing a whole bunch of assembly code here. Once again, I wonder if we're going to cover any of that. That's neat.
Game run in this particular way, especially in this subroutine section at the very bottom. That's where you see things like how it handles physics, how it handles a camera, how it draws sprites. Now, in a lot of games, for instance, drawing sprites works the same in the platformer and the adventure game. There's no difference. But
telling me that there's probably a lot of these routines and so forth. We're not going to have to change anything, which is nice. One less thing to worry about. But if you wanted to customize it, you can. That's what I'm gathering.
Let's pretend that you wanted something specific, like you wanted a health bar to appear above a player's head. Very difficult on the NES, by the way, just because of how limited you are with resources. But you could iterate handle drawing sprites. Make instead of do draw sprites, make a do draw sprites _ maze game, Joe's maze game, and assign that to do handle drawing sprites here. And then that whatever changes you made there are what's going to happen when it gets to the drawing sprites portion of the code. The same thing with let's say object collisions, when objects run into each other. Maybe you're making an RPG, a top-down RPG, where you don't really have any object collisions, right? You don't have things running into each other on an overworld. That's not how the game works. That's totally different from like a Legend of Zelda, where you like all these objects have to worry about colliding players and monsters, and player weapons and monsters, and monster weapons and the player, and running into power-ups, and all those things have to be taken into consideration. So this might change from game to game. So basically this section, and there are other sections too that are important for your game specific stuff, but really sometimes you'll see that these are the same from module to module, and some modules are going to have very specific things loaded in here. That's what a module is. So
you can be completely hardcore and hardcore code each and every single one of these. Why you would want to do that is beyond me. I wouldn't. I would borrow a shitload of code just to get to where I needed to be and customize whatever it is I need to customize.
That's when I usually say that NES Maker can really do anything that a NES can do. If you can write it in code and get it in these scripts in your module, then the NES Maker is going to be able to do it. We're just creating base modules that help you make basic basic structures for certain type of genres of games. In this case, something that resembles a Pac-Man clone, where you're going around collecting things and advancing through the levels for a high score. Okay, so this also loads up some variables. So in this, we've got a variable called my lives, and
Okay, so once again, these are stuff that you can define. So already I'm seeing how I can take the game that I have and make it my own by changing these variables. So that's good. So project settings, user variables, and what did he cover before? Covered, forgot what it was. Project labels, I think it was. And that's just pecking at the service. We're not even near. We're like 5 minutes in to the lecture anyway.
its initial value is 3. And we've got score values. We've actually got 6 variables that define the my score variable. It's not just 1 byte, it's actually 6 bytes. And when we get to that part of the code, we'll take a look at it as why. So hopefully that gives you an idea, a little bit better understanding of what a module is and what's included in it. Now let's start with just the simplest thing. Let's make some graphics. And I'm thinking, let's pretend that you made your graphics in an external software like Photoshop or Paint or something like that. I can now go to the pixel editor.
Okay, so good. I have MS Paint, which is nice and simple. I could also use GIMP if I needed to. I like that. So,
and I want to bring in some graphics, and I'll start with the tile sets. I'll start with bringing in a few of the tile sets. So I'm going to open up
well,
the
more learning streams. My goal is just to, yeah, basically just sit through this lecture, make my own notes, interject whenever I want, whatever I need to. And this would be the only time I would sit through this video, because the rest of the time I would need to be developing anyway. So I might as well learn from here first, and breaking with my own experience as we go along here. So this is basically nothing new. It just tells me that I could use Paint or GIMP if I wanted to.
The first background tile set, which is this first thing that you'll see, and you can see we're inside my folder. That'll automatically open to the folder that you created in that first step. So I'm going to open that up. And I'm going to open another tab in my pixel editor. I'm going to pixel editor, add a tab. So now I've got 2 tabs open. And what I'm going to do is basically I'm going to load the graphics that I want over here. That would be like the stuff I made in Photoshop or whatever. And then I'm going to paste them over here into the actual tile set that my game uses. So over here, I'm going to open up, and I don't see it here. What should be bundled with this module tutorial is a folder called Maze Module graphics. And here are our Maze module graphics. We are going to load in.
Okay, so this reminds me a lot of some of these. Okay, so it's bitmaps. I see how they gridded it out. This is exactly like how I would do with Unlimited Adventures and with SCI. Kind of the same set of mechanics. So that's good. I can develop it, or paint that outside of NES Maker and import the stuff in. So that's good.
We're going to load in our arcade tiles BMP. Great. So this is going to actually be our first background tile set. If you did the easy mode,
I wonder what kind of resolution this has. It's very blocky, so it couldn't be a very high resolution.
of this, then all this looks familiar. What I'm going to do is, I could just save as, and I could save it over the top, but what I'm going to do instead is, just to get used to it, I'm going to use the select tiles, and I'm going to click and drag, and this is actually selecting by 8x8 tiles. So if I just drag from the top left corner to the bottom corner.
You mentioned this, Cut Across, or someone mentioned this, doing where this thing uses 8x8. In some cases 16 by 16. I remember that from last time that that you were in here. So this is where that number comes in. This is where the 8x8 / 16 by 16 comes in.
I've got it all selected. I'm going to hit Control C. Now I'm going to go over to my background tile set, move my mouse to the top left corner, hit Control Shift V. And now I've actually got it loaded in. And if I hit the save button, this has now become my background tile set 0. This has become my default background tile set. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to load a couple of other tile sets. I'm going to load like our monster tile set. So I'm going to load the first monster tile set. If I scroll down.
Okay, so it gives, okay, so if I understand this correctly, you can load up different banks of tiles. You're not limited to just the one tile set. So I can do banks. That's also good.
Down. Always, it's going to be the one that's
in
called.
fact, I'll make that one of my assignments on my game there is to design a bank of 8x8 tiles. Will he cover 16 by 16? I don't know. At least one bank of 8x8.
Monster00.bmp.
If you're using standard gameplay screens, you're going to pull from the background graphics pattern table into PPU in 16 by 16 chunks. Okay, so I wonder if he's going to cover that. The total amount of space in NES is for one pattern table in graphics is 128 by 128 pixels. What NES Maker will do is load a combination of these tiles that fit in the graphic space per screen. Are we talking about swapping? Is this not swapping? What am I thinking of? Paging or something? Is it kind of like paging? Like you swap out a page of tiles and you load in another page of tiles. Is it kind of like that?
And I'm going to go over here and I'm going to open again in Maze Module Graphics. I've got a little alien dude. Now I'm not going to use all these graphics. I'm not going to use the ghost, and I'm not.
Okay, picture processing unit. By the way, it's basically what holds, manages the graphics and drawn to the screen. You see why this learning stream is important for me, because you have to assume that I'm an idiot, that I don't know any of these things. So that's helpful. Okay, so it's basically what holds, manages graphics, drawn to screen. Got it. I also think too it would be to my benefit to design my own alien / monster.
I'm not going to use the crab. I just want the alien guy. So I'm just going to highlight and select those top. Control C. Go back.
I like how it can snap to what you need. That's good.
To my monster, Control Shift V. There we go. And I'm going to hit save. I'm going to do the same thing with my player. So I'm going to open up my game objects, which I can scroll down to the one that says game object tiles. This is where my player and my game object data lives. I spelled alien wrong. Wow.
Okay.
I'm going to, I'll try and fix that before I post this. That's embarrassing. I'm going to open up.
Too late.
my desktop, Maze Module Graphics, and player.bmp. Now, I may or may not get.
All right, what do we got here? Much of this we're using. Are they doing the same thing here, where it's like they're able to mirror left and right, up? No, hang on. Yeah, they can mirror that set to do left and right, moving forward, moving back, dead. Is it vaporized? Never really saw that in action.
To this stuff. In fact, I think I will get to this stuff in the advanced tutorial, this whole disappearing thing. So I'm going to copy this whole thing in. I'm going to select the entire tile set, Control C.
Here's what I would recommend as a reference. Open up your old ROM in Messen and go to debug PP viewer. Let me get that down. Frame of reference is always a good thing. Okay. Debug PPU. That is a, what do we say that is? That is picture processing unit. If you don't mind cut across, I'm just going to call you Professor. I mean that in the awesomest way as I can think of, okay? All right, so we got the PPView viewer, got it. CHR, I'm assuming character viewer. And you can see how the loaded tile sets are laid out in PPU RAM as frame of reference. You also might want to pause the emulator, not have the music blaring all the time. No kidding. Pause music. Okay, so this is just for reference sake. Got it. All right.
And in my game object tiles, I will Control Shift V, and that what holding Control Shift does is it locks it to the corner of the nearest tile. So that way, if I don't hit Control Shift, it pastes it exactly where my cursor is. So I'd have to be pixel perfect to the corner for it to line up. But if I hold the Shift key while I'm pasting, then it pastes it to the top corner and it locks everything to the top corner. So that's what I want my game object tiles. Next, I got a couple more. I'm gonna open up my HUD graphics. So I've got a HUD BMP, and over here, I'm going to open up. Now, my HUD graphics, I don't believe are in that folder. Let's check. Maze Module Graphics. Oh, yep, I do have the HUD tiles. Okay, so I'm going to use those. And
okay, so you could design your own font, but once again, might as well just steal that, unless you want to take all the time that you wanted to fidget. I'd say if I want to do anything with that, I'd probably just change the color, because I can spend a lot of time doing fonts.
I'm going to select all of my HUD tiles.
Let's see. I guess I should also just first, these bitmaps are converted to character file CHR files by the tool, which are basically just sets of binary data. That's what I like about bitmaps is, you know, it defines exactly what it is. It's a bitmap. I remember when I took my first course, computer graphics, and we designed our very first bitmap using shades and did we use color? We didn't use color, shades, etc. just by generating a binary file. Blew my mind. I could do something with, you know, using a binary file, convert it. I have this wonderful bitmap. Getting back to this, these CHR files are basically what's included in your ROM. So, okay. So the NES Maker tool, if I understand this correctly, is kind of like an intermediary between your bitmap file and your CHR file, so that you can design it however you see fit, and then the NES Maker would take that and convert it to a file that which the NES will understand. I hope I'm right in interpreting that. You can correct me. That's just a guess.
Files. And I'm gonna hit Control C. I'm gonna come over to my HUD and hit Control Shift V over here. And I'm gonna save. Then I'm gonna want paths, because this is going to use paths. So I'm going to open paths. It's just the first path group, this path tile 00. And do I have that in that folder? I don't think so. Maybe I do. Maze module graphics. I do. Okay, paths BMP. This is the last thing that I do have in here. So I'm going to open that up. And I just need those first two rows. So I'm just.
All right. Could I do paths? Probably. Maybe I could design paths. It takes the bitmaps from a graphics folder and spits out corresponding CHR files, which are included and defined in the ROM graphics banks. This is when we start getting closer to marrying the software with the hardware. Cool. Okay.
Just going to select those first two rows, Control C, and paths, Control Shift V. And I'm going to hit save.
All right, I'm going to write that down because I get a feeling that I'm going to mess it up. So Control Shift V, and that's just to paste it at 00. Okay. Then a ROM screen's load system will take the combination of these tile sets to fit in the 128 by 128 pixel pattern table in the, when we get that picture processing unit, which you define screen by screen. That's covered later. Okay, cool.
All right. Lastly, I want my start screen stuff. And I want a numbers and letters screen specific tile set. So what I'm going to do is my second tile set here is going to be part of my start screen. I'm going to open that guy. And in the second tab here, I'm going to open, I don't have it in the place where the rest of them are. I didn't put it in Maze Module Graphics because we're just going to use the default start screen graphics for 4.5.6. You can find them inside your NES Maker folder, inside tutorial assets, inside 4.5.x tutorials, in graphics, in tutorial graphics. You're going to see tutorials.
I'm probably jumping the gun on all this stuff because there's a lot that goes together. True, but that's fine. You know, this is a journey of, you know, a complete beginner at all this. This is fun though. This is fun. Looking forward to see what the advanced level brings.
Screen. But now we have a problem. This is much larger, right? If I
oh no. Oh. design a title screen. I bet I could do some. I know this is like uh, just a sample title screen, but oh my god, yeah, definitely design a title screen. Oh no.
Turn on my 16 by 16 pixel grid, what I'm going to see is this is actually 6
Wait, what did
tiles
you do?
high, 6 meta tiles high.
Oh, I see.
Whereas
I
my
see.
tile set is only
I see. Okay, so he did a. Okay, so there's an 8 and there's a 16. I see. Okay.
3 meta tiles high. So you can guess how this is going to go. We're going to take the top 3, hit Control C to copy, go to my background tile set 1, Control Shift V to paste, save that guy. And now I'm going to open up my second tile set, and I'm going to copy the bottom 3 rows, Control C, and Control Shift V, and I'm going to save that. Now, there is a problem. Remember, I'm going to put a pin in this. This is not going to work the way that the others do because it is not set up for the colors for the NES right now. I'm going to have to go back in and optimize this and actually get this down to the correct 3 colors that the NES can read.
Okay, so we're looking at science of the colors here, right? Like what he says, trying to get this to work for the NES.
It in our game right now, it would show up as just black pixels. It would show up just like this. Oops. It would show up opposite of this. All the things that you see that are not black right now would not show up in my game. This is show bad pixels. This is what it would look like. It would look like these are all the tiles that you wouldn't see. These are all pixels you wouldn't see. I'm sorry. So we're gonna go back and we're going to fix that when we actually get to dealing with the start screen. Mm-hmm. So I think we've loaded. Oh, one more little tile set that we're gonna load. I'm going to open.
Okay, I get a feeling show bad pixels is also something I need to use a lot. So show bad pixels. You need that one as well.
Open up my screen specific tile set. This is going to have to do with the title screen too. Background screen specific tile set. The first one, 0, 0. And over here, I'm going to open again inside the NES Maker 4.5 tutorial assets, beta tutorial, graphics, tutorial graphics. There's one that's just 2 rows of letters and numbers. And I'm going to select that. And I'm going to copy it. Control Shift V to paste. And I notice I don't have all the letters and numbers there. So let me just go ahead and...
Okay, basically if you toggle show bad pixels and there's still pixels showing, they will not show up in game. Yeah, I'm going to need that tool for sure. Definitely will need that tool for sure.
Even though I'm barely going to need it at all, just so we can look at how it works. I'm going to open the second screen specific, and I'm going to open the tutorial assets 4.5.6 graphics, tutorial graphics, and I'm going to get that 1 row of those last letters right there. And I'm going to copy that, Control C, Control V, Control Shift V, I should say, save that. And now I have all my tile sets loaded. So that's the first step, is getting all of our graphics loaded so that I can actually start building some objects and creating some rooms and looking at what they'll look like through various palettes.
Okay.
So next we're going to create a game object for our player. And to do that, we're actually going to create the animations out of the tile sets we loaded, stuff that we skipped in the easy mode tutorial. And this is, if you're really getting into using your own graphics and stuff, this is the stuff that you're going to need to learn how to do. So we're going to get into our game object.
All right.
We're going to go to player. Now, you're going to see all these names, player, melee, projectile, sword. These mean literally zero. These are labels just like everything else. These are suggestions, but they don't have to mean what they say. You could have 4 different player objects right here. These could
Okay, so basically just another set of variables that you can tinker with. I get it.
all be projectiles. You know, they could be anything. This could be, again, not even a game like that. It could be a card game, and each of these could be different faces of different cards. You know,
Yeah.
so there's a lot of things that these can be. Usually, though, this game object 0, that's going to be your player of some kind, or pointer, or whatever. Imagine if this is a point and click, it might be your cursor, right? So disregard our palettes for a second, and let's just take a look at this part. What happened is it loaded our game objects tile set over here.
Blah. NES graphics can only be 4 values, 0 to 3, which NES Maker shows in BRGB format. B for black, 0 for red, 1 for green, and 2 for blue. Those line up with the colors in each subpalette. That's actually good to know. Black, red, green, blue. Right. That's what we're showing right here, right? B, R, G, B. Black, red. Is it green, blue? These graphics are pushed through different subpalettes to different set of colors. Okay, that's good. Good to know.
Here, and we can see that the colors are not matching at all. If we haven't gone over the explanation enough for how the colors work, I'll go over it one more time.
You don't need
I'm
to.
going to come back to the pixel editor, and I'm going to open up that game objects just so we can see. We're not doing anything, so you can just listen and pay. You don't have to do this with me. I just kind of want to explain how it works. I'm seeing here that I've got a red outline and blue hair and green skin, and that's really strange. Like I feel like that's not right. I wouldn't want this to look like that in the game. We're not actually seeing colors. We're not actually seeing the colors that this character is going to be in the game. What we're seeing is values. We're seeing color 0, color 1, color 2, and color 3. And it's letting.
Okay, I get it now. Cover cross, professor. Yeah, this makes sense to me now. What you just talked about. Black, red, green, blue. This is it right here. This is exactly what he's talking about.
You know that where you see black, that's going to be represented by color 0, whatever is loaded in the subpalette at any given time in a game.
Got it.
Whatever is red is color number 1. It's going to be whatever is loaded into color 1 when the game is running. Whatever you see as green is color number 2. That's going to be what's the third color here, and color number 3, blue, is this last one. So depending on what palette you have loaded, that's what these are going to translate to. If I click on Enable Palette Translation, I'll see what they look like through the current palette. Right now, what are they going to look like? All gray, because that's what my palettes currently look like. That's what the palettes I'm putting them through look like. So when I move over to working with the player, I can see that they show up as black, blue, white, and red and white. Why? Because black, blue, red, and white. So the first color, the 0th color is black, and then the first color, second color, third color. And that's sort of what's reflecting over here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to make 2 subpalettes for Greg. That's our hero's name here. I'm going to make player pal 0, and I'm going to rename it. And then down here, I'm going to select the very next palette, and I'm going to call it player pal 1, and I'm going to rename that. Awesome. So now I've got 2 subpalettes, and I can start. And why I'm going to do that is Greg is actually going to be made up of more colors than just one subpalette can allow. He's going to be a hair color, a skin tone, an outline color, and his shirt is going to be a different color, which is why I kept his shirt always in a different spot than his hair. So for his head.
Okay, so basically you can design the graphics using black, red, blue, and green, using an editor of your choice, import them, And then here it looks like you can just define using the palettes, excuse me, what it's eventually going to look like in your game. Is my guess.
Head, for instance, I want his hair, which would be represented by white, to be, he's like a dirty blonde, dark hair, dark blonde hair. His outline, I could make black. It's going to be really hard to tell, but I'm going to make it this darkest shadow blue, which is usually what I use for outlines. And then for his face, I'm going to want it to be a peach color.
Okay, I'm going to pause it right here. So this is all the colors that the NES is capable of producing. I'm right about that.
Either, you know, this one or this one, probably. Some of these other ones.
The pixel editor has a tool to change all colors to be the BRGB values NES Maker expects them to be. It's called the global color change. I like that.
Ones would be good for different skin tones, but you don't really have too many choices. Great. So that's his top.
Well, that forces you to use your artistic creative license. Don't have that many choices for colors? Well, use your imagination.
Top half of his body is sub-palette. What about the bottom half? I want it to be the same outline color so that the outline will match all the way around him. And I want it to have the same skin tone because his hands are down there too. But I don't want to have the blonde of his hair. Instead, for his body, I want to give him a shirt and I'll put him in green. So the top half of him is going to look like this and the bottom half of him is going to look like this when I'm done with him. Okay, great. So that's how I can start setting up my sub palettes. Now, when it's translated through the palette on the screen,
that color palette isn't entirely accurate because NES Maker doesn't want you to choose the two color values that can actually cause problems in some displays. Okay, interesting. So there's some colors that choose the two colors. What colors, I wonder, gives problems? Interesting.
these are the colors that are going to show for Greg. And I'll show you how to set that up when we get to our screen. So we need to first make all of his animations. So Greg is going to have
Shira's NES screen tool shows a more accurate palette, you're gonna get massacred for that, aren't I? But again, some colors are duplicates or just aren't good to use. Oh, hang on. Receive the text. All right, so okay.
A couple animations for this game. He's going to have standing still, he's going to have walking, and he's going to have death or dying. Those are the animation types that we need for this module.
Right.
I'm going to go to his manage animations. I need standing still in all four directions. So I'm going to say idle down. I'm going to rename that. I'm going to add idle left. I'm going to rename that. I'm going to have idle.
Color 0D is blacker than black color that some displays can interpret as a sync pulse that throws the whole display out of sync, but otherwise this is duplicate 0F. If I understand that correctly, it sounds like you're just better off using 0F as black. So I'm just going to put down 0F black use with big circle around it, just so that I know that I'm using 0F and not 0D. Let's make a note there. Used as a sync.
Right. I'm going to rename that. And I'm going to have idle up. And I'm going to rename that. Now I'm going to do the same thing for walk or run. You know, I'm going to name one.
But NES Maker's UI basically forces you to use 0F for black anyway. Well, since I'm not going to use 0D for anything other than sync, and I don't even know what sync is, we're going to get there at some point, whether it's going to be through the videos or outside the videos, don't care. Then I'm perfectly fine with being forced to use OF, just for designing sprites, etc.
Run, down. And obviously, if this was a platformer, I wouldn't necessarily need all four directions, right? So I'll rename that. I'll add run right. And I'll add run up. And I only need one death or hurt or whatever, and I'll call it hurt, because no matter which way I'm facing, I'm going to show this same hurt graphic. So it doesn't really, I won't need four directions for hurt. Now that I've got these animations, these are all the animations for this game for this object.
Right.
I can actually go in and start, figuring out what tiles I want to represent which animation. First of all, Greg's bigger than one 8x8 tile, so I'm going to have to make him 2x2 tiles. Right now I'm looking at his idle down animation. And idle down is this guy right here. I could go through and I could, one by one, fill in his tiles like this.
Nice.
In fact, I could also flip.
Nice. Okay. Oh, that is nice. So animation details, that will... you can make your character as small or as big as you want.
Tiles, vertically and horizontally, if I wanted to. Or, just real quick, I'll show you, I'll just mess this up real quick. If I wanted this tile, this whole thing to be here, I'd click on the top left corner, hold the shift button, and I could add multiple tiles at one time. This put all of his tiles using this first subpalette, but I said that I wanted his shirt to be green. So I'm going to use the second subpalette. And now you can see how those subpalettes are going to work together to give me the impression that he's got that extra color. So I only need one frame for idle. So now I need idle left, which is going to be this one. So I'm going to shift, click and drag, and then I'm going to make this hair blonde. Idle right is going to be the exact same as idle left, except...
Okay, the only really unique color you're losing is 2D, which is a dark gray, but the color can radically vary depending on the display. We are talking a dark gray. If you're going to be using losing a dark gray in a blacker than black, I'd be okay with missing those two. Again, I think it all depends on how creative you can be working around.
So I'm going to make his shirt green, except I'm going to flip the frame. So now he's facing to the right. And for idle up...
Good, perfect, okay. The NES can only render 64 8x8 pixel sprites at once, so only 8 of those sprites per scan line. So no, there are strict restrictions on object sizes and such. Okay. Once again, I'm not. I'm just getting new to this, so understand. Okay. But I do like that you can. Okay, so basically you can flip frames, which means you only need to make one set. If your character is running to the left, you don't need to make a go all out. You could if you wanted to. Um, you could also copy frames too. Flip animation. I guess just to see that everything flows. And okay, so 3 tiles per animation. I think.
I'm going to use this one, and I'm going to make his hair blonde. So I've got all my idle animations all set.
Mm-hmm.
Now I need to move on to run, and this is going to start to include multiple frames of animation. So the first thing I'll do with those is I'll set them to 4 frames. I'm going to set up run down. So my frame 1 for run down is going to start with this arm forward, and I need to make sure that I make his shirt green. Frame 2 is going to look just like the idle pose, and I'll make his hair blonde.
Mm-hmm.
Frame 3 is going to have the other arm forward. I can't remember which one I did. We'll make sure when I check out the animation preview. And frame 4 is going to be back to that idle stance. And now I can test my animation by hitting the play button. And I did the same one twice, no problem. So I'm going to go back to 1, 2, so 3 should have the other hand forward.
Okay.
Like that. And make his shirt green. There we go. Now if I do the animation preview, I can see he looks like that. Perfect. Now I will do run left, which will be 1 hand forward, blonde hair. Don't forget to give him 4 frames. I will go to frame 2, which is going to be sort of like his stand or his idle. Oops, come here. And make it shirt green. Frame 3, which is going to be his other hand forward. Make sure you click the top left corner before you shift, drag.
Got it.
And the last frame is going to be that idle stance again.
All right, that's neat. So with 6 frames, you can make as many animations as you want to. Okay.
Okay, so now I've got running left. Running right is the exact same thing as running left. So there's a few things I could do. I could go ahead and do all that again. I can also go to manage animations, and I'm going to delete run right, and I'm going to duplicate run left, and I'm going to change the name of that to run right. I'll rename that. And now if I look at my run right, it looks the same as run left, and I can flip the entire animation. So now
Nice.
my run right looks like this one.
Nice.
And my run left looks like that one. So that's a sort of easy shortcut to if you have the same animation that's just going to be flipped. So I can flip individual tiles, I can flip individual frames, or I can flip entire animations. And I can duplicate an animation. And this is
nice. Work smarter, not harder, right?
a huge time saver for right and left animations that are pretty much the same. Next, I need to do run up. So it's going to start with right hand back, and I need to make sure it's 4 frames. Give that blonde hair. frame 2 is together. Oops, together I said. Frame 3 is left arm back with blonde hair. And frame 4 is the same as frame 2, which is arms together. All right, so now we can see I've got all of my animations except for hurt, which is just one frame, and that's this one. I've now got all of my protagonists' animations loaded in. And now I'm going to go in and I'm going to start working.
Okay. That's just going to go along with the design player.
On his object details. Now we need to talk about the difference between animations and animation types. We have 3 types of animations. Standing, idle, running, and hurt. We have multiple directions for each one, but there's really 3 types of animations: standing still, running, and hurt. So what I need to do is, in my object details, I need to define 3 animation types. The first one will be idle. They do not have to be named the same as your actual animations. I'm going to add, I'll even call this one moving, just so you know it doesn't have to be named the same. And a third one called death, which the animation was called hurt. Okay. So in idle, if I'm moving down, or if my direction's down, I want it to show idle down. I don't have a diagonal, but if I'm facing to the right, I want it to show idle right. Don't have a diagonal. If I'm facing up, I want it to show idle up. Don't have a diagonal. If I'm facing left, I want it to show idle left. What if I'm moving? Well, if I'm moving and my direction's down, I want run down, no diagonal. Run right, oops, no diagonal. Run up, no diagonal, and run left. And death, all of them are going to be this hurt. So now I've set up all of my animation types that I can use in conjunction with my player's actions. So when he actually changes actions, I can determine, okay, when he's doing this type of action, it's him moving. When he's doing that type of action, that means he's standing. You know, I could change these action types. All right, let's go to details.
Okay.
The first thing we need to do in details is we want them to be a player object that is persistent. Now, the only object that you're going to make persistent in your games, almost in all cases, is going to be the player object.
Okay. So persistent is, okay, the player object is always going to be persistent. I feel like there's some kind of background reason for this. Because the player character is going to be throughout the entire game. Got it. Okay. Also, just reminder for sprite graphics, any 8x8 tile in the BMP bitmap to CHR can be reused whenever, so you don't need duplicates if you can reuse them using horizontal and vertical flips to optimize. Tile set really doesn't show that all 16x16 assets with lots of duplicate tiles. So basically, it's kind of like a challenge to work with less, possibly. Hang on a second. All right.
The player object is the object whose properties you want to carry over from screen to screen. when you're on a screen and you have a bunch of monsters on that screen, let's say you attack a monster and it's only got 1 hit point left. And when I change screens, I don't want that monster to remain on the screen. I want it to clear all of that screen's monsters
Absolutely.
and load all of the next screen's monsters. So we don't want that to be persistent. The player, though, if the player's down to 3 health, when we change screens, I do want that information to carry over. I want it to be the same object. So it doesn't get cleared when you change screens. A persistent object does not get cleared. That's what that means. A lot of these,
Less tiles taking out space equals more tiles to fit in for other things. Absolutely. I feel like some of that's used in animation in general, where, um, say, compare Japanese animation with American animation. Japanese animation uses less cells, where American animation uses a lot more. Um, you can sort of see the difference. Back to this, saving space, using less, etc. Absolutely, optimization, because a typical NES card is, can't imagine it being more than 24K, 30K, 36K, something like that. Uh, Not a large amount of room.
don't exist in the maze module. The scripts don't ever call health or experience points or strength or defense, anything like that. Doesn't really call these bits, which are a new thing. It does observe solid collisions, though. If I run into a solid object, I should stop. That's what I want to do for my player. Also, I need to give it a speed, and I'll give it a speed of like, I don't know, 18. And acceleration speed, I'm going to put up all the way to the top. And that just means that it won't feel like I'm walking on ice. When I start moving, I'm full board. I'm going, full speed right from the time that I start moving. If you want to try and play a little bit with acceleration, so it feels like you've got to gain momentum, you can turn
Hello,
acceleration
Thunder.
speed
How are you
down, and
doing?
you can start experimenting with that. And that's what that does. With my actions, I've got a couple of steps, and the way that this module works, my player's action step 0 is his idle.
Yeah.
My player's action step 1 is his moving, his running, and for that I need to give him an animation speed. So I'll set his animation speed to 3. And with his death action, with his action step 7, that's his death action.
Mm-hmm.
So I try and put the death actions at the bottom if I use them this way. What I'm also going to do is I'm going to set an end timer, and I'm going to set it to, say, 10. And when the action is over, it's going to go to continue.
Okay, so there's a lot to play around with here, isn't there? I'm doing good tonight. You stay in Southern California. Close, South Carolina. Wrong coast, my friend, no, but still in the South.
So when I'm showing death, it's going to set a timer. And when that timer goes up, it's basically going to restart the level. It's going to go back to my last continue point, unless I'm completely dead, in which case the game's going to restart.
Okay.
I'm going to set up a bounding box for our player. I generally don't do this for bounding boxes. Mostly because then you have to be pixel perfect for them to fit between 2 solid blocks, and it just never happens, and it's super awkward. Right. So what I'll usually do is something like this. It still feels like a center of mass thing. It doesn't, but if anything, it cheats for the player.
Okay. Could someone explain to me bounding box? Because he just glossed over that. What is the effect of a bounding box?
Just a little bit. If a monster were to graze my player's hair, it wouldn't actually hurt me, and that's
okay. All right, got it. That's her hit box. That's what that is.
okay. I'm okay with that. And also gives it a little bit of a dimensionality. So if you're moving against a solid block, your hair kind of is over the top of it a little bit. So we've got that. And now with all objects, I usually hit save. You don't really have to do this with your game objects. You always have to do it with your monsters. So I'm going to hit save. And you can see that my icon that showed up there is little player icon in my in my hierarchy over here.
Got it.
So awesome. Now we have added our first game object. The next step is to start creating a basic level. In order to make a level, I'm going to go to the overworld and I'm going to pick a screen, any screen. I'm picking 3, 3.
All right, is this something I could skip over? Because we covered that on the first one. I feel like we could skip over this.
And you can see this is the same interface, and I could give that a name if I wanted to. So
Yes,
if I go over to all palettes, I could call this, I could rename it and call it arcade. And I could actually set it all up here, but it might be hard to see. I don't know what color relates to what part of the tiles and that kind of thing. So sometimes it's easier just to name it, and then let's come look at it over here. And you can see I've got arcade palette loaded now. I named it over here, and now it's named in here. Don't worry about day-night palette. We're just going to stick with day palette for now. We're not going to talk in this tutorial about day-night systems or triggers or anything like that. But we definitely are going to deal with color. So I don't know which one of these corresponds to what color, but let's see if we can start experimenting. Let's add like blue. No, I want the floor to be blue. I think this is the floor. I'm correct. Okay, so this is the floor. And let's just look at like this.
Okay, so, but we can name it whatever the hell we want to. Or change the color to whatever the hell we want to. All right, yep.
Arcade cabinet. What colors do we want that arcade cabinet to be? Maybe some really contrasting colors like, you know, red and green. I mean, that looks kind of interesting. And I want the floor to be blue for, you know, all of these. So I'm going to go ahead and do this, at least for those 3. And now this is that. Let's look at my skee ball. That doesn't quite look right.
Okay, so we can basically use our imagination for how it is we want to define these palettes.
Where I have green should definitely be like a yellowish color, like a wood grain, maybe a brown, but I think brown's gonna look too dark. So I'll go with this, and maybe the sides of the thing are, you know, like a rust colored red or something like that. That looks kind of like a skee ball. Sure, I like that. Okay, and that also looks good for, you know, games as well. So I've got like a dark version and a lighter version for the arcade games. And then I could jump in and let's do something completely different that really stands out. So like, you know, a pinkish arcade game, and the top of it is, oh, I don't know, this sort of lime green, and that totally gives it like a pastel looking game. So you can see sort of how I added this palette. So now this palette exists, and I can start actually creating with this. The last thing I'm going to need is I'm going to need something for this, which is my quarter. So I'm going to want to create the same color floor, because this quarter is going to have to change into this sub palette. So the floor is going to be the same color. I'm going to use like silver and maybe a dark silver right there. And that also looks good for some of my cabinets. I mean, I might use that, but it definitely helps with that quarter standing out. So cool. Now I've actually got something I can start building with, and we're going to build the exact same way that we did in the other tutorial. So if you need a refresher, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shift, click and drag on one of these assets.
Okay, all in favor of skipping this next part? Yeah, okay.
I'm just going to copy and paste. I'm going to hit escape, and I'm going to shift and click and drag, let go, and hit Control C. And you'll know it works if that white line goes away. So if I click and shift, I see a white line appears around my selection. Control C, and that goes away. And now what I can do is I could Control V and Control V.
Right.
And I'm just making a couple spots where there are arcade games, and, you know, trying to make it look a little bit like an arcade here. So now I've got a basic flow for my arcade. I want to put some quarters in there, so I changed the silver. I'm going to go to screen info, and right in the middle of the screen I can see it says path group. I can select arcade paths,
right,
and hit OK. And now I can pick what color do I want the arcade paths to be. Maybe I want it to be sort of a silver, you know, gray. And now my 1, 2, 3, and 4 keys will draw paths in this tile layout mode. So I'm going to just go ahead and, oops. Oh, well, it's okay. It's drawing the wrong color, but that's because that's how I have it set inside my path group. I'm going to change that color in a second. The exact same way that I changed the color of those arcade cabinets at the top, I can change the color of this wall.
Right.
So I'm going to use my R key to change this to a gray wall. Like this. And I'm just holding on to my R key while I'm dragging over what I want to change to that color.
Right.
So cool, that's looking interesting. I'm also going to need something to escape to the next room. So I'm going to just put that tile right there. That's going to be my escape. You might want to make like stairs or a door or something like that. That's a little bit more interesting. And I'm going to put my player somewhere in the room by right-clicking, place player. And I know his color is off from what we said, and we're going to change that in a minute. But right now, the good news is I should be able to test and run my game, no problem. And nothing's going to happen. I don't have any input set up. I don't have any collisions going. But I should be able to test and run my game. We might break if I don't load sound effects. In fact, I think we will. So because one of when I collect a coin, it wants to play a certain sound effect that I don't currently have loaded. If I look at my sound effects right now, I only have empty sound effect. So before we test and run it, let's right click on sound, import Family Tracker text. And if we go to NES Maker 456 down to tutorial assets, beta tutorials, sound, we've got our 4.5 sound pack, which was awesomely put together by the community for the 4.5 release and actually a Greg game that we had conceptualized during the lockdown. So really cool to be able to use this stuff. These are some sort of generic sound effects and some awesome music that we can utilize.
Right.
So now that that's loaded, I should be able to play the game, and nothing's going to happen, but it will open. So let's export and test by clicking this button in the top bar. That assembles it, puts it all together, and spits out an SROM, and opens that in Messin. And there we go. Now I can't move, I can't do anything, but we do have our nice little arcade here. Awesome. So we're doing very well.
Okay.
The next thing that we want to start doing is we want to think about adding our inputs. So before I just had you guys load in some inputs and it automatically loaded in the scripts. We're going to do this manually this time.
All right.
I'm going to go to scripts, input scripts. And now I can start actually loading input scripts to my game. Base 4.5, game, and if I go to Maze Base, I don't think that there is.
Once again, I am really glad that there's some pre-made scripts here. That is just going to save a lot of time trying to figure out how to type this in on our own.
Any inputs in Maze Base. So let's take a look. There is no inputs, and the reason is because all of the inputs that I'm going to use for this module are very common and used across multiple games. There's nothing really specific about them. So I can go to just...
Why reinvent the wheel, right? That's good. Perfect.
Go up a level into just my 4.5 game and go to input scripts there, and you can see all my module stuff, specific stuff is here. If I go to my input scripts here, here's what I need. I need move in all four directions, down, left, right, and up. I need change action to moving, change action to stop. I also need start game with new continue points.
Whoever developed these assembly scripts also follow the number one rule for most of us coders, which is basically fucking, have it intuitive. Give it like an intuitive name. So that's awesome.
And simple reset. And I'm going to need stop moving. Okay. Those are the scripts that I'm going to need in order to make the inputs for this game work. So now that I've got those loaded, I can go to input editor. And now I need to tell it, okay, when do I want to call each of these scripts? When do I want to do each thing? So with this, when I press up in my main game for my player, when I hold up, I'm sorry. So if I toggle this, I can go between press, release, and hold. If I hold up my main game for my player, I'm going to move up. And I add that script, and you can read this left to right like a sentence. On my controller 1, in my main game, if I hold up, my player will move up. Same thing with right, except I'm going to have him move right.
I'm just going to put this as an exercise to myself because I need to figure out on my own how to assign inputs. I will have to reference this, of course I do, but I need to do it enough to where it becomes intuitive. So that's going to be another exercise here. I already have so many of these fucking exercises to do, but I have to become good at it.
Same thing with down, except I'm going to have him move down. Same thing with left, except I'm going to have him move left. Now, if I press up, I want him to change to his moving action. So for each of these directions, if I press that, it's going to change to moving, which will show that walk animation. And if I release up, I want it to do two things. First of all, I want to make them all stop moving. So if I press any of the directions, or if I release any of the directions, it's going to stop moving. And the other thing it's going to do, if I release up, is it's going to change to change action to stop.
Okay.
Oops. Sorry. We just did change action to stop. That's what I mean to say is we've already done change action to stop. Now we actually want it to stop moving. So now for every direction, when I release, it stops moving.
There we are.
Sorry, I did that backwards in my head. So what I should see is 4 basically similar scripts for starting to move when I press the keys, 4 changing to the moving action, 4 changing the stopping action, and 4 actually literally stopping moving action. So now when I have this and I play the game again, the character will move around the screen. I have not set up any collisions yet though, so he's just going to walk aimlessly and walk right through all the objects. But let's test it to make sure that I got my inputs
and
set
we
up
covered
right.
collision in the first part, so we could probably skip that as well.
And it looks like I did. So now I can move around the screen.
Yeah.
When I let go, it stops moving and changes to idle animation. You can see my inputs. I've got the little indicators down here so you can see what I'm pressing. All right, so now we got to add some collisions, right? And all this is very leftover from the last tutorial. But let's jump in, and what I can do is these are all the collisions that loaded with this game. Now, here's where we're going to look a little bit deeper in this tutorial than we did in the last. We talked about how in project settings, we have these labels: walkable, solid, hurt, warp, checkpoint, tile, prize tile, and so these undefined ones. And what I had said was, these don't actually do the things. This is not what makes it solid. This is not what makes it a warp tile. This is just a label that lets you know that that's what type of tile.
Basically, variable name is what I'm getting here. So I'm in a house. Does not define a house, just defines what kind of building I'm in. I can call this, my flat, my the place I sleep in, park my lazy bones, etc. It's a building. It's a house. Same thing here. Solid, hurt, warp. It's just a name.
This that you're going to set this to. So when you're looking over here, you'd be like, okay, I'm not just looking at something that says tile type number 2. I'm looking at something that says hurt. So I can identify, okay, that's what that is. It's for your own benefit. That's just a label, and there's project labels for a lot of things in the game. What actually is going to make it function properly is in the script settings.
That's what I thought.
So if I open up the script settings and I scroll down to my tile settings, I've got a blank tile for null. I've got solid tile for solid. I've got a player hurt tile. I've got a warp to screen tile. I've got a checkpoint tile, and I've got a prize tile. That lines up with what I had for my tile. types of tiles.
Got it.
So if I wanted to start adding different types of tiles too, if I made a tile that makes you win the game or plays a certain sound effect or, whatever else I could, or makes the monsters all go into their, scared ghost phase like Pac-Man, like a game like that, or destroyed all the monsters on the screen or launched a text box or anything, I could add a new type of tile right here. So I could add the tile type. I could, find the script that aligned to it, and then I could give it a name over here to tile type number 6. So then this is what would show up in my menus as to what the tile type was, and what I had, whatever I load into here, whatever script I load into here, that's what it actually will do. So that's it's really important to start to get to understand the relationship between the scripts and the labels. And a lot of times, you won't necessarily be writing scripts, but maybe somebody in the forums wrote a really good tile script or a really good AI script and you want to use it.
Okay, so this is where having a good community, good programming community comes into play. So that's good. You don't have to write these scripts. You can just borrow someone else's, um, following programmer logic. That's handy. It's also handy having a nice not if not exhaustive, a nice library that you can borrow from.
It. You can then import that, and you, as long as it aligns with the module, you can use that, and you won't have to write any code yourself. You can use the community created content. Also, if you did want to start writing your own code, you can click on one of these and hit edit, and that's going to bring it up in your chosen text editor in a second, if it doesn't crash on me. Hold on one second. There we go. So this is what that actually does. This is.
Now that's nice. CBXBQ jump. Okay, so this is where the learning curves will start. Learning that language.
This is what that tile actually does. And, it takes a little bit of time to get to understand some of this, but a lot of this stuff is pretty easy. For instance,
I've been toying around with C#, JavaScript. Well, that's what I do for a living. And with, what was it now, the Sierra SCI companion, I've been dealing with, it's kind of small talk based. Seeing this doesn't seem daunting at me at all. This is just like dealing with another language. Nothing I would, little time would, getting used to and tinkering around with it. It's not as bad. I'm only seeing a part of the code right here. I don't think it's going to take very long for me to get used to it. The thing about NES Maker's code base is that it sets up a bunch of macros that replace the ASM code they represent during compile. I get that. That's what do they call it now? They call that abstraction, not abstraction, but it's kind of like basically stuff that we can understand and hides sort of a more technical language underneath that, which would go to machine level base, whereas this could be more understandable to us. I don't know if I'm communicating properly what I mean, but this, again, this doesn't seem overwhelming to me, especially since you have somebody documenting it, which is great.
Play sound and then the name of a sound effect. So if I look at the name of all my sound effects, here's all my sound effects. You could figure out, you might not know how to write this, but you can definitely figure out how to change that. Play sound in camel case, capital letters, and the pound symbol or the hashtag or the number symbol, whatever you call that thing, SFX underscore laser would play this sound.
I'm going to call that a tag. And I'm saying that because I deal with jQuery, where we would take like HTML whatever things and manipulate using jQuery JavaScript code. So I see it as a tag. That's what I'll call it. Whatever someone else calls it, it's up to them.
If I wanted it to play damage, it would be #SFX underscore damage. So even if you're somebody who's really sort of nervous about starting to dip your toes into code, that's not really coding, right? That's just altering some stuff. So don't be afraid to do that and experiment with it. You can always undo it and restore it to what it was.
That's the one thing with code. Do not be afraid of code. What's the worst that can happen?
But definitely we want to be able to jump at that part, and we'll even change that sound later in this very tutorial. So great. So now I've got those sounds loaded, and I've looked at what's actually happening as far as the collision, calling those scripts. Now I need to actually set up the collisions. Right now everything is null, everything is 0. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to change it to solid, and everything I want, every one of these collectibles, and you'll see it changes to say 5.
Skipping.
And everything's going to pretty much function right now. And now I haven't set up where my warp's going to take me, and I haven't set up a HUD yet, so it's not going to show full functionality. But now I can actually collect these things, and the solid walls block me. And this is going to do wacky things. It did warp me, but it took me somewhere really bizarre. So we're going to talk about why and how we can fix that. So now let's get to the point where we can warp to the next screen. And we've already got our warp tile set up. Let's go to my overworld, and I'm just going to copy and paste this screen by clicking on it, hitting Control-C, clicking on the screen next to it, hitting Control-V. Now sometimes that's a little bit finicky. Just try it again and hold Control for a little bit longer before you hit C and that kind of thing. It can be a little bit finicky with the update, but it does work. So let's fundamentally change this screen by just taking out all the things in the middle here. Receiving that player. So when he warps in, what's his location? And let's say I want him to start right here. That's tile 7-6. So I'll go to screen info. When I warp into this screen, I want put text and I want to call it score. Score is going to be the variable my lives.
No,
and it's going to have a max value of 1, and that just means how many place values it's going to have. So this is just going to be a single-digit number, and then my element number 2, I'm going to put text and I'm going to call it score.
Skipping.
Score should definitely go up when I get those quarters.
Skipping.
NES Maker and NES games, they're working with hex values, and we want to fake that we're working in decimal values. So this is one of the ways that we do it is using an overflow. So when this gets over 9, it sees it as a new place value and it updates this variable, this byte that's one address higher. It's going to kick that number up, just like in regular math. You know, when you overflow in the ones place, it kicks up that number into the tens place. So let me show you that script, because you guys are probably going to learn really quick about increasing and decreasing variables or adding single digit numbers to a variable, but that's not going to work for a system like this where we've got multiple variables that are drawing what's supposed to look like a single number. So let's take a look at what happens when I run into that tile. So when I run into that tile, script settings, and I'm going to look at my prize tile, which is in tiles, it's tile type number 5. I'm going to go to edit. Here is that add value. Here is how I am.
Look how simple that looks. That looks great, doesn't it?
Actually adding to that number. So it is a macro called add value.
Yep.
And it tells you right here the information that macro needs. 1.
Document your code, people. Always document your code. This is what helps us beginners out.
How many places does this value have? Well, it has 6 place values. what is the home variable that you want to change? When it's talking about home variable, it's talking about what is the ones place variable, the first variable in the list that you want to update. How much do you want to add to what place? So I'm adding 1 to the hundreds place. So if I put a 0 right here, watch what happens if I put 0 right here. I want to add 1 to the ones place. Now, it's adding to the ones place instead of the hundreds place. Just for kicks, let's pretend that this is, an actual quarter. And I want to add 5 to the first variable, which is the ones place. And I'm going to duplicate this, copy, paste. I want to add a 2 to the tens place. So now it's going to add 25 to that number. I'm going to save that.
Okay, so sounds basic to me. Watch me refer to this video when I change these variables.
Now it's going to be like actually collecting quarters. So if we want to update a multi-digit number, that's sort of the system that we're going to use. I'm going to change this back so it's not confusing to you guys.
I wouldn't say it's confusing.
So if we want to add value or subtract value from a multi-digit number, that might be a timer, that might be a score, that might be experience points, these kinds of things, we're going to use the add value or subtract value macro. And this is the information that it needs. If you ever need to know that information, if you look at a macro, so if I go into NES Maker 4.6, game engine data, routines, base 4.5, instead of going to game, I'm going to go to system, and I see my macros. Macros should all have the data that they need right at the top. I've tried to be really conscientious about this. So it tells you
Document your code, people. Always document your code.
what all arguments have to be. I would write the words add value, and then I would separate the arguments by commas, just like what you saw in that tile that we just looked at. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense for those of you who have never done code. Again, we're not really doing that deep a code at that point, just dipping our feet in it to make subtle changes.
That's fun.
The other piece of that code that I want you to look at that's really important is this one. If I go to tiles and I look at prize, this is also really important.
Okay. What we're looking at.
Wants to come up. I think it's taking so long because I have all the other scripts open right now. Yeah. So, okay. This is the other thing that's really important. Update HUD element is another macro.
Got it.
You can see it's updating HUD element number 3. Why is it updating HUD element number 3? Well, if I look at my HUD elements,
I'm gonna take a guess. The one, I was gonna call it a function. The one function updates the variable. The other function updates the screen.
0 is the text. We don't need to update that. 1 is the variable called my lives. I'm not updating that. 2 is the text score. I'm not updating that. 3 is the actual number, my score. So once I've done the addition and the number has changed, that's when I want to update it on my screen. I want to say, hey, next frame, go ahead and redraw that entire number. And it knows what number that is because of what I put here. So if I wanted to change, if I wanted it to update the variable my lives, this number right here, this would be update HUD element 1. So if I put something, if I put a new number here.
Okay, so zero, one, two. Okay, I'm seeing the connection. Definitely seeing the connection.
And this was supposed to be the thing that was supposed to update. I would update HUD element 7. So hopefully that makes a little bit of sense. Now, if I want
It
a
does.
different sound effect to play, very simple. Let's play cursor. I'm going to save that. That's this one right here, SFX cursor. I just changed which sound we're going to play, and now that's going to play a totally different sound. So very simple. Okay, so hopefully that helps a little bit understanding how to do that sort of addition to multi place values.
Yep.
So a couple other things. Now we need to make a monster, and making a monster is almost identical to making a player. So
right.
It takes a little bit of work. I'm going to go into Monster Graphic Banks. I'm going to go into Graphics Bank 0. I'm going to go to Monsters. I'm going to make it 2x2. And I need to manage animations. Now this guy's only going to have one animation, and I'm just going to call it move.
Okay, don't know. This is going to be similar to making our hero character.
I'm going to call one move up. I'm going to add move down.
I'm just going to skip this next part because I don't think it's going to be too much different.
Take his move up, which I want all of these to be 4 frames. And frame 4 is going to be
skipping.
And 4 is going to be this one. But flip.
Skipping.
Object collision script will know, okay, if this runs into a player, it does certain things. If it runs into a tile, it does certain things because it's a monster. In this type of game, it doesn't have health, he doesn't have experience or strength or defense. When he hits a solid object, he's going to reverse direction. And when he hits an edge, he's going to move opposite direction. I'm going to give him a speed. I'll give him a slow speed so that I can get around him. And acceleration speed all the way up. If you wanted him to sort of slowly accelerate to a new speed, like a ghost or something on ice, you can slow that acceleration speed down. Doesn't have a jump speed. His actions. Well, his first step, he's going to be showing that move animation, and he's going to move in a random direction. And if I set my timer to 0, that means I'm setting it for a random number, and when a timer goes off, it runs the end action script. What do I want to have happen? I just want it to repeat. Loop will mean nothing changes at all. He'll just keep, he won't see another action. Repeat means that it's going to run this action again. So every time that timer goes off, he's going to switch directions. And that's what I want. So I'm also going to give him an animation speed. I'll make it a little bit slower than the player. And I'm going to give him a bounding box. Comparable to the player, maybe sort of, again, cheat towards the center. Try and make it symmetrical, like that. Close, and I need to give it a name, so I'll call it alien, and I will save it. And now I've got an object for my alien. You can see it in my drop-down. If I want this alien to be in the game, though, I need to make a monster group out of it. So I'm going to add aliens to my monster group. And I'm going to give it a name. I'm going to call it aliens. Aliens. Okay. And hit save. And now you can see I've got a monster group, and it's got all aliens in it. Now I can put that guy in my game. So I'm going to go to Overworld. And if I go to Screen Info, Day of Monsters, because Day is the only state that we're going to deal with right now. Now I can set up my palettes for my player. So this is my sub palette for this screen.
Okay, I'm skipping.
Control pad or whatever it is. Get over here, get past them, go to my next screen, monsters reset, no monsters on the screen. So I would have this warp to a wind screen. So awesome. Now we got monsters running around. We have death. We have, things that we collect. We can jump screen to screen. Let me look at what actually happens when you with the death animation. So if you were to look at the player death here, so I'm going to go to script settings, and I'm going to look at the handle player hurt script. So the first thing it's going to do is it's going to make sure that the game is actually running. And that's what this first part does. The next part is it's going to look at your player and it's going to say, hey, are you using action step right now? Because if you are, you can't be hurt. You can't be hurt when you're already hurt. So this can only happen if you're not already in action state number 7. If you're not already in action state number 7, it's going to decrease your number of lives and update HUD element number 1. That's where the variable my lives was.
Okay.
Now don't forget, lives is a single digit variable, so I can use decrease and increase to change it. If I want it to be more than 1 digit, I would have to use the add value or subtract value and use that macro that we looked at.
Got it.
So now I'm going to look at that value and I'm going to say, okay, take a look at that variable my lives. If it doesn't equal 0, we got other stuff to do. That means the game's not over yet. But if it did equal 0, game's over. Boom, reset. So if it did equal 0, we are going to change the player into step number 7, and we're going to stop moving. We don't actually have a recoil in this type of game. But we are going to change to action step 7. Cool. So now we know what's going on in the player hurt script. What happens with action step 7? Well, if we remember, if I go back to my player, and I go to object details, and I go to actions. If I change to action step 7, it's going to set a timer for 10.
Yep.
And when that timer's up, it runs the end action, which is going to go to the continue state. So if there was lives left, it's going to jump to action state 7 for the player. And then when that timer is up, it's going to go to the continue state, which is why I continue on that screen. That being said, that kind of means we want to set up a checkpoint system. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to go to my overworld and I'm going to put monsters on the screen. If I right click, look, oh no, where did they go? It's because I never set up what monster group this screen is going to run.
Nope.
So I need to go to my info, go to day monsters. Same thing, player palette 1 and alien palette. And I'm going to put the aliens in there and hit OK. Now I could put an alien in there. I'm also going to put a checkpoint. And for right now, I don't know. I'm going to use this, but I'm going to keep it green. And this right here, I'm going to set to a checkpoint. I'm going to right click on it and I'm going to modify the attribute. I could go up to here and I could change this to checkpoint and I could hit 0 and look at collisions and that would change it. Or I could just right click on it, modify the attribute, on checkpoint. What that's going to do is it's going to set the new continue point to this tile on this screen. So if I die after I've reached that checkpoint, I'll start again right here. And that's going to be great for you guys who are making longer games. So let me test this out, make sure that it works.
I think you're going to make a point of setting a checkpoint or 2.
So first of all, if I run into a monster, I do lose a life and I started back on the screen, okay? And now if I get to this next screen, and I get to this checkpoint, and now I die, it starts me on this screen, unless I don't have any lives left, in which case it starts the game over. So that's what I would expect from that checkpoint. Really cool. I could make it do more things, like I could make it create an effect or a sound effect that lets me know that yes, you reach a checkpoint, and maybe we'll do that in the advanced tutorial when we talk about how we can extend the capabilities of this. But for right now, we want to wrap this up by giving a start screen and an end screen, which we didn't look at in the simple version of this tutorial. So we talked earlier about these two. If you ever see this and it doesn't look like it's lined up and it looks squashed, that's what this is for. Force square aspect ratio. Just click it twice and it should put it into the right proportions. Okay, we talked a little bit about these. They're not going to work in our game because they're all bad pixels. None of them are going to show in our palettes here or through our palettes. So what I've got to do is I've got to make a new palette just for the tutorial here. So I'm going to use palette number 1. Okay. If I want to give it a name, I can by going to palette. I'm going to palettes. I want palette number 1 to be start screen. And now if I go back to my pixel editor, I'll set
Here's
it
the
to
feature
start
viewer.
screen,
Yep.
which is palette 1. Instead of arcade, I'll set it to start screen.
Mm-hmm.
And now I get this blank tile. So what am I going to do? Well, I need yellow and light blue and dark blue to make it look like this. So I'll use yellow, maybe this one, and I'll use my global color change to change all of this
You mentioned
to
that.
an
You mentioned
actual
that.
color that NES can see, which is this first color.
Yeah.
If you want to see it translated through this palette, I would click this Enable Palette Translation. And there we go. Now I need a light blue color. So I'll paint this a light blue color. And now I need a dark blue color. So this is the graphics file that's actually being created.
Got it.
If that runs through this sub palette, it'll look like that, which is pretty close to the original that I was going for.
Okay.
So now I've got to open up my part 2 and do the same thing. So I'm just going to paint yellow, paint light blue, paint dark blue. There we go. Save that. And now I'm going to make some special screens for start and for win. I'm going to go to Overworld. We're going to look at making 8 by 8 pixel tiled screens. These are all 16 by 16 tiled screens. You can see if that's the smallest unit of measure that I can add to these screens. For this game, I'm going to make some 8 by 8 pixel tile screens. Now, there are some limitations to using 8 by 8 pixel tile screens. You're still dealing with...
All right, Professor. I remember you telling me about these things. So I think I think
with color on the same 16 by 16 square. You're still dealing with collision on the same 16 by 16 square. And more importantly, you're using 4 times the amount of data per screen, which means you're going to cut the number of screens by a quarter, which is why we set it up so you can just use collections of 32 screens, one bank of screens to change. If I go to Map, Advanced Map Properties,
you told me.
and I change one of the rows. Now this is going to change these first 2 rows. If you put your screens in these first 2 rows, you'll want to choose something different. This lets you know 0 screens exist in that row.
Yep.
It's rows 0 and 1. And if I hit OK, it would erase anything that was in those first 2 rows.
Right.
And it has now made 8 screens that will have 4 times the amount of tile data so that I can actually create screens with 8 by 8 tiles. So with this, I'm going to change from my arcade palette to my start screen palette, and I'm going to change my tile layout. Instead of seeing main screen path, which is the default for NES Maker games, I'm going to go to double main, no HUD. And I'm going to change my tile sets to main tile set. And then my screen is already loaded in the way that I want. So now I've got access to those graphics for the tutorial intro screen, and I've got all my letters and numbers at my disposal. So I'm gonna hit OK, and now I can go through and you can see that I can get a smaller gradient from my tile set. I can hold Shift, click and drag, and I can pop that in. I can click, Shift, drag, and draw that in. And now I can get these individual numbers here in letters, and I could write, press start. If I was in 16 by 16 mode, I would not be able to do this. I'd have to actually create full 16 by 16 tiles that said like PR and then had 2 spaces under it. Here I can actually get to the 8 by 8 tile level, so I can write something like press start.
Okay, I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to stop here. And this is... I just get a feeling that he's going to do a start screen and an end screen. I can review that on my own, but I think I have more than enough here to take the game that I've made and customize it. So basically, I'm going to take my current project, see if I can redesign a bank of tiles, redesign the alien, redesign the player, so that I'm using my own assets instead of borrowing someone else's. I'm also going to use the picture processing unit view and the CHR viewer for the sake of references. Professor, you're the one who recommended that. Let me see. Probably see if I can design a path. Uh, get to something more and more original. Design a title screen. Make use of the bad pixels. Show bad pixel tools. Hello, dog. And define inputs. Get used to figuring that out. Using checkpoints and setting in a start screen and an end screen. So basically, it's going to be a lot of work here, but that's the point. Is that you're putting your heart and soul into something here, and I'm moving away gradually from cut and pasting using someone else's work to cut and pasting using my own work. So I'll end it there, and we'll get to programming starting, well, whenever we start. So I think I'll stop here, and I'll see everybody next time. Isn't that right, puppy? Where's mine? I lost my remote. Here it is. All right. So I'll see you later.
Distant on a wasted grace, twist upon a face replaced.